O femme, tu t'appelles accostancy.
Well, I mean, first of all, Hamlet, it's a director's dream because it's been around for hundreds of years, and Shakespeare is fantastic because he talks about ideas and emotions, and he doesn't talk about specific times or places, and he's very free of sort of details that sort of get in the way of making something a true classic. So even when it's transferred over to being an opera, that Thomas took it in the 1860s, and made it into an operatic form, he didn't add any sort of time and place specific things. I mean, they talk about being in Denmark, obviously, but that's sort of a generic setting, as we know, with all of Shakespeare. He had never visited any of these places, and they were more sort of distancing devices than they were being specific to a certain time and place. With Hamlet, you just have to, if you're going to direct it and put it on stage, how do you put ideas on stage? You're not just sort of representing a specific time and place, because that's not inherent to the piece. When I got the commission for this production originally, I was working in Berlin, and in East Berlin, next to the Deutsche Oper, there's this sort of huge piazza where there used to be other large sort of monumental buildings there on the Unter den Linden. And during the war, a lot of things were destroyed, but the plinths of the buildings were still there. And I remember walking down the street on the way to work and whatnot and thinking, sort of in my mind recreating the world that was here, because you can sort of see the footprint of the buildings and where the columns might have been, and the stairs, and then you start to sort of reconstruct almost in your mind how it would have been. And I found that kind of like fantasy place of what could have been or what might have been, or sort of what my sort of Western received wisdom of the place was versus what somebody who was born and raised in the GDR would have thought of the space. And it seemed to be a really sort of charged atmosphere, even though it was basically empty. And I thought that that was something that I wanted to recreate for this Hamlet, because when you're working on a production, it's just sort of like no matter what you're doing in the world, you're just sort of finding things, and they end up sort of crystallizing in ways that you don't really plan for, but end up being successful.
You know, when you think about Thomas, to me it's an incredible mystery, because 150 years ago, he would have been on anyone's top 5 list of famous, important composers of the day. He was actually even the president of the Paris Conservatoire, which would be like Dvorak was when he came here to the United States. He was riding the tide of a series of successful operas and compositions. And the fact that he is today relegated to the "where are they now" drawer is really a great mystery to me. I'm not really exactly sure why that is, because I do find his music very, very entrancing. It's definitely passionate music and structurally very sound. I mean, when they were commissioning this opera, they wanted the big 5-act French opera, and so you've also got this huge ballet in there, because that was sort of fundamental for any piece of the time. He uses the drama and depicts it with the orchestra. I mean, that's one thing about this opera that strikes me also as a little bit Wagnerian, because when you have that Greek chorus, which is the orchestra, in a classical piece, when you're talking about Mozart or Haydn or Beethoven, you know, they use the orchestra in a structural sense, but they don't usually do as much painting with the orchestra. The Wagnerian sense is that when the singer is singing something, maybe in the orchestra pit, you hear this theme, this motif, which tells you that maybe they're thinking something else. And so the piece can take on additional layers. And that's what I think you can hear many times in this piece, is maybe you know, in duets and things, there are times when the characters on stage are relating to each other, and the orchestra, which is seething and brooding underneath, is telling a very different story.
So there's a mad scene of Ophelia, all of Act 4, which is originally quite long with a ballet, but that has a lot to do with sort of the custom of the time, that we've sort of concentrated the Act 4 down to just this really crucial moment of Ophelia's sort of leaving the palace and contemplating suicide and all of that, in the classic bel canto mold of a mad scene. If anything, there's probably 2 excerpts that are called out of the piece, and it would be her whole sort of mad scene and his drinking song, so-called. But I would actually think that the whole Hamlet is a mad scene. The opera itself, the play itself, the story. Hamlet is going crazy over the events that have transpired between his mother and his father and his uncle. And so from the very beginning, we've set it up that Hamlet is going mad. And there's a lot of musical things in that I think are interesting. There's this sort of series of fanfare trumpets that play throughout the piece. It opens the whole first scene, and then it sort of comes back as this kind of interjection. It's almost like these sort of attacks that Hamlet has in his head, and it's something that in theory sort of sounds celebratory and happy, but it's his mother's and stepfather's happiness that it's celebrating, but that's actually sort of like daggers in his heart and his mind.
When the queen starts manipulating her into just softening Hamlet up for her, and Hamlet just discovered that her father was also part of a plot, he completely dismisses her and rejects her completely, as if that beautiful first act, love duet, where he swears his love forever, never existed. And at that moment, she really kind of starts losing it. It's like, okay, reality is not what she thought. There's nothing as that it is as she expects. And there is an actual long scene before we get to the mad scene. There is, you know, a big duet with the mother. And she kind of goes into. We can easily think that during that time where she gets rejected, she kind of wander around and she's completely lost and starts making believe that actually they have already had their wedding, they're already married, and she tries to convince herself of that. Of course, she doesn't know that. She's incredibly sad, deeply despaired, and that dichotomy of trying to make believe that what she wants is real and finally that it's absolutely not, she will decide to just play a little trick on him and drown. She's really losing it, going from really sad to really happy. I mean, not happy, of course, but she's from real laughter to tears to screaming to... It's a beautiful, beautiful, like 12-minute scene. That's really intense.
So in this case, the drinking song, it might sort of sound like, oh, vin, discipla tristes, like, hey, we're happy, like, let's drink, let's get drunk and then we'll have a really good time. But really what he's saying is, I'm buckling down for the night and I'm going to call my mother and her adulterous, filthy husband. I'm going to call them to the carpet for what they have done to defile my entire name, line, blood, bed sheets. Everything. So in order to do that, he's sort of taking liquid courage to pull himself together. And I was talking to him sort of image-wise, you know, just sort of using, I use lots of sort of popular culture images in my work, is Miranda Richardson from The Crying Game, you know, getting ready to, you know, do the big assassination in London. And it was like, you know, she was putting every sort of earring in place and every hair was in place and the suit was pressed, you know, because she was sort of arming herself with this sort of crystallized beauty, and so that she could do something obviously really horrible, assassinating a judge. And so he's sort of doing the same thing. It's almost sort of ritualizing the violence, which makes it sort of scarier and deeper. When he turns up at the party and he's going, hey, we're having a good time, we've sort of seen this moment before when we just sort of, you know, to use another Shakespeare quote, screwed his courage to that sticking place.
People's relationships with their parents are incredibly complex, you know, and so I think that's really the main, for Hamlet, that's really the main, you know, thrust of what his story, I think, is his relationship with his mother, and also, you know, just wondering like what it's all about, like becoming a man. I think really, like once his father is dead, then it's suddenly, you know, he's facing like a lot of adult questions that he's, you know, not, I don't think, really prepared for, which is why he's so emotional and distressed.
I mean, the ending of the opera has gone through several iterations, and it was first written in France. It was a happy ending that Hamlet was sort of crowned king and everything, you know, he was the successor to the throne, and he sort of moved on up. And that is actually similar, in a sense, maybe to the ending of the classic Macbeth, that you know, that Malcolm ends up taking over, and there's a sort of idea of like succession and going forward. But Hamlet doesn't end that way. Hamlet sort of ends with, you know, sort of ticking off the boxes of, is everybody dead yet? So then when the opera premiered at Covent Garden in London, it was just sort of, the management understood that an English audience wouldn't understand or wouldn't accept this other ending. So, but I think that anytime you start having these sort of multiple endings of things and multiple versions of things, it opens it up to the people that are putting it on stage now, Christopher and I, as well as the rest of the cast and the orchestra, that we have to find our own version of it. So I'm not interested in any sort of academic exercise about we're doing the Covent Garden ending or we're doing this ending or how does this chord resolve or whatnot. But even yesterday in the music rehearsal, we're sort of cutting and pasting and playing things on the piano and with the singers. You know, it's like a workshop of a world premiere in a sense, to say, now if you sang this line, if the orchestra tacited, what if the clarinets came in with this chord and did that? It's all material that's there. It's not like we're composing something from scratch, but yet we're creating an opera that's never ever been heard, an ending that's never been heard until we get to opening night. And hopefully it'll change between now and opening night as well, just as something like with a production of Doubt would change between rehearsals and even between performances, perhaps, you know. You can't think of these things as sort of dead works that we just sort of add water, stir, and bring back to life, but they're sort of complicated pieces with no definitive answers, and we just keep plugging away.
Et obrata noveri pur